The vastness and mystery of space have always fascinated mankind. From Aristotle's ancient Greek theories about the universe to America putting the first man on the moon, the wonders of space go far, far beyond anything we could ever imagine. Thousands of feet above the Earth's surface, the deep black abyss of outer space has been inspiration behind countless works of fiction, movies, TV shows, and documentaries, not to mention some pretty elaborate hoaxes. Although our world and the ones sitting high above us may be far apart in miles, there have been times where space and Earth have gotten closer than some people might feel comfortable with. Despite UFOs and aliens being recurrent favourites in the world of science fiction, there are people on Earth who claim to have had very real dealings with these otherworldly phenomena. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 mysterious UFO and alien encounters reported from around the world. The 1884 Nebraska UFO Crash. 1884, the infamous American West. Advances in technology were fueling the belief in the manifest destiny in the United States. On the 6th of June that year, a band of cowboys was herding cattle in Dundee County, Nebraska. But what began as a seemingly normal day was to take on a strangeness all of its own, when the group suddenly saw an unusual orange light streaking across the sky, which crashed a distance in front of them. Described as a blazing meteor of immense size by John Ellis, the heat coming from the object was so intense that it reportedly burnt one of the herders and prevented them from getting any closer. They therefore decided to return the following day instead. That night, local residents reported a strange glow coming from the crash site. Upon their return, they found a large object, around 50 or 60 feet long and 10 to 12 feet in diameter. A local newspaper speculated that the vessel could have been from another planet. This idea was later promoted by Brand Inspector E.W. Rawlins, a well-respected local man who documented that the metal that had been broken off the craft was like brass, but incredibly light. The strangest part of the mystery was yet to occur. On June 10th, it was hastily reported by the press that the mystery ship had completely disappeared. A dense fog had descended upon the site, obscuring the view of onlookers. The ship then apparently dissolved in a rainstorm, with nothing left of it except some small, jelly-like pools. Some people thought that the local media had been overly eager in their attempt to discourage visitors from the crash site, an idea that began to sow seeds of doubt over the legitimacy of the crash. Many people now believe that the crash was simply an elaborate prank by a group of cowboys or set up by a local newspaper. Evidence later suggested that the events in June 1884 were hoaxes, and many of the so-called witnesses refused to comment further on their experience, even years later. Was this because they were a party to the hoax? Or were they perhaps fearful of the memories? Whether or not the Nebraska incident was indeed a hoax is up for debate. However, it can't be argued that the events that took place in June 1884 marks the true beginning of this modern UFO craze in America, one of which has consumed the imaginations of millions. Thutmose III, Ancient Egyptian UFO Sighting. It's probably fair to say that when you or I talk about UFOs and aliens, we tend to cast our minds to Hollywood sci-fi films about Area 51, or the outdated toys and comics of our childhoods. Ancient Egypt probably wouldn't feature on that list. However, in the land of the pharaohs, pyramids, and the Great Sphinx may have been a scene of the earliest sightings of UFOs known to mankind, way back in 1840 BC. In that year, Thutmose III reigned over ancient Egypt. As well as being known for their rich culture, Egyptians were also very scientifically advanced for their time. It's believed that ancient Egypt in this time was the first place to experience extraterrestrial events. However, there are clear limitations in the evidence. This being said, Thutmose and his people, judging by a few factors, had a fairly credible claim. The events that allegedly occurred were reported in great detail by the Tully Papyrus, a text that was discovered thousands of years later in 1933 in an antique shop in Italy by a director of the Egyptian section of the Vatican Museum. He thought it was too expensive to buy, so skillfully created a copy in hieroglyphics. The original Tully papyrus was severely damaged, and mistranslations of the text are likely, therefore presenting some clear limitations. However, many UFO researchers are convinced that it points to an extremely early existence of life from a world not our own. The now suspected UFOs the Egyptians wrote about were described as a circle of fire or fiery disk. They allegedly shined in the sky more than the brightness of the sun, and apparently were seen in numbers as the day went on. The Egyptians were known to be highly advanced in their scientific beliefs for the time, so it's unlikely they would have misinterpreted extreme weather for one of these objects in the sky, which further fuels the theory. As with many UFO sightings, the true story is extremely unclear, but it could be possible that the ancient Egyptians were onto something. Human nature in itself is extremely cynical. We prefer to doubt and criticize rather than believe and look optimistically at things. Whatever you personally believe about the Tully papyrus records, it's clear that there is a possibility the reign of Thutmose III saw the first extraterrestrial life on Earth. The Mori Island Incident. June 27, 1947. Harold Dahl was on a conservation mission on a boat with his son and his dog off the eastern shore of Mori Island in Washington State. Dahl and his party were gathering logs when he spotted 6 disc-shaped objects in the sky. One of these suspicious discs dropped suddenly, swooping down around 1,500 feet. Metal began to rain down on the boat, like something from a sci-fi horror film, striking his son Charles. The family dog was also hit, and allegedly didn't survive the experience. Dahl managed to photograph some of the mysterious discs in the sky, which upon his return to land, he showed his supervisor, Fred Chrisman. Chrisman was skeptical about the photos he had just been shown, so decided to go to the area where Dahl had seen the saucers to experience the phenomenon for himself. Unnervingly, he too reported seeing them. The next day, Harold Dahl alleged that he was approached in a diner by a man in a black suit, asking about the sighting and warning Dahl to never speak of it. It is widely acknowledged that this part of Dahl and Chrisman's story created the Men in Black stories that we know of today. Chrisman and Dahl then contacted a man named Kenneth Arnold to talk about their experiences. Arnold had a fairly prolific portfolio of UFO sightings, including one which allegedly occurred only days before Dahl's extraterrestrial experience. After hearing of their story, Arnold was convinced by the veracity of their story. So much so that he contacted a US Air Force intelligence officer who flew into the area from California with another Army official. After inspecting the rogue metal that had fallen upon the boat, the officers concluded it was merely aluminium. They decided not to tell Arnold this, as to not embarrass him. At this point, things started to get weird. On their way back to California, the 2 officers' B-52 aircraft caught fire and crashed. Both officers were killed in the crash. This begged the question, had the officers seen something they didn't wish to report and were taken down as a piece of foul play? Was it an innocent accident, or was there some sort of extraterrestrial element involved? Harold Dahl and Fred Chrisman later admitted the entire UFO sighting was an elaborate hoax. Interestingly, Chrisman would later testify in front of a grand jury that he was not involved in a high-level murder leading to the death of John F. Kennedy. Although the mysterious metallic objects that had fallen from the sky on the day of Dahl's sightings were deemed not to come from a flying saucer, some believe the material could have come from a slightly sinister source. It's possible that the metal was radioactive material from a US military operation, or from a secret reactor core the CIA had been tasked with dismantling. Although the Maury Island incident may not have been entirely real, It marked the beginning of decades of fascination in the media about bridging the gap between alien and human life in the form of Men in Black. Those were 3 unexplained UFO encounters from ancient Egypt all the way to the modern day. Although there are discrepancies in the evidence gathered from these cases, we can be sure of one thing. Our deep sense of awe and wonder about space has always made us question what life, if any, might exist out there. Whether the people who claim to have made some sort of contact with alien life were telling the truth is a matter of continuous debate. However, what is certain is that something must have started our fascination with extraterrestrial life, and this something could quite possibly have been something very real indeed. So what do you make of these mysterious UFO encounters? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and help us by growing this community whilst working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.